Hey guys, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani here. Today's video is going to be on thyroid medications, in particularly T4 and natural glandular thyroids. Is it good enough? Can you get by with just levothyroxine or T4? We're going to dive in. Really excited to do that. Also, before we do that, please smash the like button. Give me a thumbs up. Put your comments down below. Let me know your thoughts on the topic and your experiences with different thyroid medications. So off the bat, right, we have our typical generic T4 medication. It's tetraiodothyronine, typically with a sodium attached to it. Your general Synthroid, which is, I think it's patented by Abbott. And then you have variations like levothyroid or levothyroxine, which are pretty similar generics that most conventional doctors prescribe. These medications have a 4 to 5 day half-life, so they're typically taken only one time a day, not 2 times a day. And it's just going to have your T4 in it. Now, I see a lot of patients coming into me with these medications already on their protocol. They're already taking it day in, day out, and they still have thyroid issues. Now, why is that? We're going to talk about why that is. Now, with T4 medications, there's a giant assumption that, you have TSH, that's your brain hormone that talks to your thyroid to make T4. T4 is relatively inactive compared to T3. It's about 300 to 400% less metabolically active. That T4 goes through a deiodination process and it gets converted to T3, which is more active, 300 to 400% more active. That's where all your metabolic effects happen. There's an assumption that T4 and T3 get converted kind of at a 1-to-1 ratio, so to speak, meaning if your T4 is in the middle of the reference range, your T3 is in the middle of the reference range. That's what I mean by that. Your T4 free, the good functional range is like 1 to 1.5 on T4 free. T3 free, 3 to 4 is a pretty good reference range on that. So the metrics are a little bit different on those. But, based on the reference range, 50% of the reference range with T4, 50% on T3. Not quite. It doesn't quite happen that way. And again, so yeah, people with adequate levels of T4, their TSH look nice and pretty because TSH, it has feedback from T4 and from T3. So TSH, ideally the perfect level, it's a brain hormone, not a thyroid hormone. Most people confuse it as a thyroid hormone. They say, oh, my thyroid's great. My thyroid was tested. It's like, no, your brain signaling hormone that talks to your thyroid was good, but your thyroid could still be out of balance downstream. So we want to see that T4 ideally closer to 1 is good. As the T4 starts to increase, it's a sign of hypothalamic dysregulation, meaning that feedback loop from the thyroid, from the brain to the thyroid is dysregulated. And there's different reasons why that could be. So if we start to see elevations in TSH, that's going to overstimulate the thyroid. And sometimes the thyroid needs that overstimulation just to make those levels adequate. And so sometimes we may see those levels, the TSH of 3 or 4, and you may have normal thyroid. Well, it's like having to get your kids to do something and yell at them all the time. It's not the best way to communicate, right? So we want to make sure that TSH is good. Conventional medicine, they're typically going to be giving that T4 at a level enough, just usually to bring that thyroid closer to 1 to 2. So again, it's an inverse hormone. So TSH goes up when thyroid goes down, right? And so if we increase thyroid levels, typically what's feeding back here is T4, is as T4 comes up, that TSH kind of balances on its own. Now, T3 also does feedback as well. So T4 does feedback. So as T4 comes up, TSH comes down, and T3 as well. So most conventional endocrinologists in primary care, they're just giving just enough T4 to bring that TSH back in the range. Now, you can still have a whole bunch of thyroid symptoms. You can still also have very low T3 levels as well, because you may not be converting that thyroid. So we have our conventional T4 that's usually given. I give you the main one is Synthroid. The generics are levothyroxine, Levoxil, etc. These are going to be your major synthetic tetraiodothyronine. Tetra means 4 iodine molecules bound to a tyrosine, and then your body converts that via an iodination process where it uses a selenium-based enzyme, 5' deiodinase. It pulls off an iodine. It takes it from T4 to T3. And that's how that conversion happens. There's some nutrients and a lot of things that have to happen in between for good thyroid conversion. So inflammation's going to affect T4 to T3 conversion. Zinc levels. Of course, selenium, because that 5 deiodinase enzyme is going to be a selenium-based enzyme. So if we have liver or glutathione issues, that can play a role. Zinc, selenium. Of course, if we have any thyroid antibodies, that's also another big one, because thyroid antibodies, 1, they create inflammation in the thyroid. 2, they can prevent the thyroid from essentially producing adequate levels of thyroid hormone just via attacking tissue. It can also bind up receptor sites so that hormone can't bind adequately. And then, of course, when your thyroid's inflamed, it's going to require more selenium, it's going to require more CoQ10, it's going to require more magnesium. All of these things play a role. So you have to look at all the nutrients that are needed in between. Vitamin A, of course, omega-3s, especially if there's inflammation. So all of these things are incredibly necessary for adequate thyroid conversion. Of course, imbalances in cortisol, too high or too low, insulin resistance, surges of blood sugar, all of these things play a massive role. Of course, if we have gut issues, not breaking down protein, right? The major building block of your thyroid hormone is a protein called tyrosine. So if we're not breaking down protein, not absorbing our nutrients, lots of gut inflammation. There's been studies showing people that take Prilosec, they don't absorb their thyroid hormone adequately when they take it, right? So we know gut absorption plays a major, major role. So on the more natural side, we do have things like Armour, NP thyroid, Nature thyroid, and we also have WP thyroid as well. There's a couple in between there as well. I think in Canada, there's one called Urfa. There's also a couple other brands that are like kind of questionable. I know there's one called Unithroid that's a T4, T3. I think it's a T4, T3 synthetic. You also have a T4 that's a more natural T4. A cleaner T4. It's like a Synthroid, but it's called, Tyrosine. So it's in a liquid gel cap without all the fillers, because the Synthroid does have a little bit of maltodextrin, some food dyes and stuff. So if you have autoimmune issues, if your doctor is a good doctor and testing for antibodies, some of those things in your typical T4 could be stimulating to your immune system. So it's good to know that. So Tyrosine may be a better option if you do okay with T4. If you are converting, not all patients not all patients have problems converting T4 to T3. I'd say most do. And I say most do feel better with a little bit of T3 in there. So my kind of default is always going to a natural glandular first, because you get T4, you get T3. And there's also, I call it the X factor, right? There's nutrients in thyroid glandulars that help with thyroid function. They're called protomorphogens, PMGs. There's studies on thyroid glandulars actually helping to lower thyroid antibodies. There's also the hidden support, which is T2, which has metabolic function and activity. And most labs, I don't think any labs, unless they're at a research level, even test T2. And then you also have T1, you have calcitonin. So there's other nutrients in glandulars that you're not getting in a medication. So of course, T3 is going to be really important. Now, you can take it in a compounded form called liothyronine, or another one called Cytomel. I think it's by King Labs. Cytomel is another one. Again, I prefer to take it in a glandular form first and then pull it out if we need later. But typically a glandular form is going to be the best way because of the other nutrients packed in it, because of some of the protomorphogens, which have been shown to lower thyroid antibodies, and because there's some nutrients in it too, which is very helpful. And so I like that. And again, when you're taking T3, we want to take it 2 times a day at least, because it's going to have a shorter half-life, up to a day or so, but patients feel it within 3 to 6 hours of taking it. There's kind of this up and this down. And we know thyroid hormones not being produced just all at once, you're probably going to make that throughout the day. So it's nice to have some T3 in there. So you have your T4s, which are going to be your Synthroid, your Levothyroid, your Levoxyl, and then of course you have your Unithroid, which I think is a combination of Synthroid and a liothyronine. You have your T3, which is going to be liothyronine or Cytomel. And then you're going to have your Tyrosine, which is your cleaner T4. It's a better T4. So people do well on a natural, I shouldn't say natural, but a synthetic thyroid hormone. You're probably better with a Tyrosine because it's at least cleaner and it's better absorbed. It's in a little gel cap, so it's nicer absorbed. I tend to always default, because I'm on the natural side, to go to either an NP or a WP or a Nature thyroid or a Armour. Those are pretty good. NP and Armour are kind of in their own category, about 60 milligrams a grain. And then WP and Nature thyroid are in their own category of about 65 milligrams per grain. Okay. And in general, WP and MP have cleaner, they have less fillers. There's less crap in there. You're going to see like things like WP thyroid have something like MCT, some chicory root, some glandular tissue, some MCT oil. That's it, done. And I think Nature thyroid's made by the same company. I think it was RLC Labs, and they're very similar. There's 1 or 2 extra ingredients in there, but both really, really clean. Again, there was a recall on WP thyroid last year, And essentially the dose was too low on some of those thyroid supports. So if you were taking it throughout last year, you could have had a drop in your thyroid levels. And that's, as long as you're testing your thyroid, it's no big deal. Then you can catch that and adjust the thyroid hormone with your doctor. I also have a thyroid glandular that I use, and I formulated called Thyroid Balance that I use. It's very similar and works very well, and it has some of the selenium and some of the nutrients in there. Tiny bit of copper. Your thyroid does need copper, not a lot, tiny bit. Also zinc. And then, of course, some of the extra things like magnesium and CoQ10, and especially selenium when there's autoimmune issues. So not everyone needs that T4, but most people are going to find, not everyone benefits with T4 alone. Some can handle it, but most are going to do good with that T3 because you're getting that conversion support. But the X factors are going to be dealing with your gut, dealing with your diet, dealing with your blood sugar, dealing with the adrenals and cortisol connection, dealing with your female hormones, and dealing with liver function, especially selenium and glutathione. So I hope that helps. Just kind of giving you guys a broad perspective on how the thyroid or how these different medications work. Not everyone has to avoid a medication, a T4 medication. Most will do better though. And if there's autoimmunity, most will do better because you're avoiding a lot of the fillers that could potentially overstimulate the thyroid. So, because when we have antibodies, the more we attack the thyroid, the more that tissue becomes sclerotic, non-functional, and won't have the ability to produce adequate thyroid hormone over the long run. So I hope that makes sense. Let me, oh, by the way, if you guys enjoyed the content, feel free to give me a thumbs up, click down below, and also leave me a review. I really appreciate it. If you want to click down below, there's a link where you can schedule consults with myself worldwide, available to help patients. Like my staff, my colleagues are worldwide, so feel free to click that link and you can schedule and work with myself. All right, very good. Let me just deal with a couple of questions here. We're going to go live on this thing. Dr. J, it's Michael here tuning in from Canada, Ontario, mostly in Sudbury. You've been sending me emails. I'd like to get a consultation with you personally. Great. Absolutely, Mike. justinhealth.com. Click on the Work with Dr. J button, and you can do that. There'll also be a link down below. Not complete and only blood test, but free T4 1.3, free T3 2.7, TPO 31, and TSH is 0.6. Would you say this is okay for now while concentrating on cleaning up the diet, liver, adrenals, etc., or get fully tested now? I mean, that's pretty good. There's definitely a little bit of autoimmunity there. Once you go above 20, that's definitely a sign of some autoimmunity. Some labs will say 10. Free T4 is good, but there's your free T3 is in the bottom 25% of the range, so there's definitely a drop there. Your TSH is 0.6, which is okay. 0.5 to 2 is usually all right. But there's definitely some dysregulation because your TSH should be higher than 0.6 for your free T3 being down here. So there's definitely some low levels of T3 and your TSH should be a little bit higher based on what your free T4 was. So there's definitely some conversion issues. And so I think definitely working on gut, digestion, adrenals is a really good first step out of the gates. Okay, really good questions. All right, very good, guys. Hope you enjoyed today's content. If you did, give me a thumbs up and click down below. How do I know if I have a pathogen in my body? We'll have to get some testing done. All right, so click down below and we can talk about those next steps. Hope you guys enjoyed today's content. Feel free to click down below for more intel on myself. Thumbs up. Really appreciate it. You guys have a phenomenal day. We'll talk soon. Dr. J signing off. Take care. Bye.